We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. Lindsay, Patterson, Mike Santagata. It has been a minute. There's going to be just a few in July, and we'll be back when training camp is in full swing. Mike, how you doing?
Good. Despite the cough that was off air, yeah, nobody heard it, so only for visual people. Yeah, doing great. I think off season's been going swimmingly for the Bengals and me.
You know what? This offseason, we've talked about it before, but it felt like it started in mid November, and now we are 2 weeks away from training camp starting. And I'm just really happy that football practices will be starting, players will be competing at practice, preseason will be here before you know it. I love summer. I'm not trying to wish it away, but I'm ready for football.
Not there yet.
Okay.
College football game comes out, that'll be my fix for a while.
Yeah, that is, I mean, I don't want to sound like I don't know enough about it, but I don't play it. And I know everybody's so excited and I'm so happy for everyone. It's coming out on Saturday, week from Saturday.
I think it comes out. It comes out next week. I don't. It's all weird because
I'm
if you
sorry,
pay for this
everyone.
thing, no, yeah, it was, you pay for this thing, you get early release. I think Friday is like the real day it comes out, but people will be playing it on like Monday and Tuesday. I didn't pay for anything special. I just got the normal one. I think that comes Friday. I don't really keep track of that. I will check closer. But yeah, I only sad thing is they don't do FCS teams, so I will not have my Youngstown State Penguins. I'll have to find a new team.
That's
Put your
okay.
bids in.
That's okay. And I'm excited for everyone because it looked, I'll say the trailer looked really cool. So
Yeah.
I'm pumped for everybody. I just don't play and I know I'm missing out. One of, I guess Joe Burrow has been pretty active this offseason, even though he said, hey, I was Hollywood for a week. He very rarely does a podcast. He's actually jumped on Pardon My Take about 3 times and one other one since he's been in the NFL. And I actually thought it was a pretty good episode for Joe Burrow. Of course, anytime a franchise quarterback speaks or talks and there's not a whole lot happening in the offseason, it's going to make headlines. I feel like the biggest thing that made a headline from the podcast interview was when Joe was asked if there would be an 18 game season, kind of his outlook, what it would look like for him, maybe in the perfect scenario. And no, Joe was not advocating that, hey, please add another game. It was just kind of a hypothetical situation. And Joe, I felt like brought up a lot of good points. I think a lot of people, at least on the social media side, agreed with Joe, fans definitely, because they'd get an extra NFL regular season game. But Joe pretty much just said, hey, give me 2 buys, maybe put the Pro Bowl week 13 higher ratings, kind of treat it like an NBA All-Star game. And then the Super Bowl would fall President's Day weekend, and most people are off work, and maybe that'll lead to a lot of other companies giving people the extra day off, and you'd have a 3-day weekend because everybody always wants that Monday off after the Super Bowl. I thought it was a great. I don't think what Joe said made too much of a difference from what could happen in the future for the NFL and what the commissioner has actually brought up during the offseason. Do you have any thoughts on the hypothetical 18
All
game
Star Week.
schedule?
All Star Week's awesome. I mean, they're the only league that doesn't have an in-season All Star game that I can think of. I don't even follow the NHL closely, but I'm pretty sure theirs happens in season. NBA for sure does. MLB, yeah, it's going to happen. I don't know, sometime soon. I saw people getting picked for home run derby. So one of the few
Mm-hmm.
things I watch of baseball. I'm like, yeah, hit dingers. That's what I love. But that'd be huge, and you wouldn't have the thing of, well, that team was too good, so their players didn't go. Like, what? Like, yeah, they made the Super Bowl, so now they can't be in the All Star game and have fun. I think that would help a lot for viewership of that, but also would help the players because they're not going to take All Star Week seriously. Nobody does. The NBA doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
None of those places do. MLB is probably the closest to it. I think. Yeah, you have like old time like. And then it used to decide who hosted the World Series. It was insane. I don't think it still does. Anyway, 2 bye weeks for an 18 game schedule. Now I've seen the thing where people are like, "Oh my God, Joe Burrow's for an 18 game schedule." I think he's just realistic about what's going to happen
Yeah.
because the commissioner keeps pushing for it. The NFLPA, they haven't won this fight yet. Like they haven't been winning these fights, so they're probably going to lose this one too. There'll be an 18 game schedule, and he's just looking for ways to make that 18 game schedule manageable. I get the idea of like, well, don't even give him the option, but it's also just like, come on, it's most likely going to happen. If it doesn't, this is just if there's an 18 game schedule, there should be 2 bye weeks, which is what everybody's saying.
Yeah, and there's a couple things I want to say about the NFLPA. If the NFLPA actually and the NFL cared about safety, they wouldn't have some teams play 3 games in 10 days. So Joe Burrow pretty much saying, hey, if we're going to play 18 games, give 2 bye weeks, here's some more eyeballs to the Pro Bowl. You get your 3-day weekend for the Super Bowl, and it's the best case scenario. It's going to happen eventually. We don't know when, but I feel like the NFL will win this against the NFLPA. And just because Joe Burrow answered a question on a podcast, it doesn't make him the bad guy. And I just thought it was absolutely silly that it kind of got a little blown out of proportion and Joe answering a question. But I think a lot of fans actually agreed with him. I saw a lot of Joe Burrow for commissioner. This is a great idea. They were fans of the Bengals. They were fans of the other teams, and they loved the idea. And again, at the end of the day, fans want more regular season NFL football games. And if you said, hey, we're going to put a Pro Bowl week 13, you get 2 bye weeks, just do it. That sounds good to me, unless someone else has a better solution when they do roll out the 18-game regular season for the NFL.
I feel like the idea of not trying to push for the 2 bye weeks and be like, well, we're not just going to push for the 18-game season is how they ended up getting a 17-game season without 2 bye weeks. Mm-hmm. So if you know one's going to happen, you may as well start pushing for the other that is realistic that you could get. Because to me, it's just not really realistic. They're going to keep 17 games. I think they're going to move to 18. They love money. So it helps the NFL too. Yeah. Really, because you'll probably get more viewership on that All-Star week. 2 bye weeks extends the season. More NFL. You're going to push it all the way into middle of February or late February or whenever at this point. Maybe March at this point. But you're going to get more NFL. More NFL. The NFL should love that. But yeah, I'm for what Burrow said. I don't think it was at all bad or weird. I think All-Star week makes a ton of sense, and 2 bye weeks makes sense. And if you're just upset about him saying 18-game season, well, he's not the only one that said it, and he wasn't pro it. He was just giving kind of like a compromise for it.
Yeah, there were a couple other things that when you go back and listen to the podcast, I felt like was honest Joe Burrow. He talked about kind of what he's, said in a few interviews with Vogue when he was at Paris Fashion Week, when it comes to kind of relating with fans and kind of getting used to being famous and being out there and kind of, it's really hard to hide his life and be private so much. And he's trying to open that up so fans can kind of connect and see a little bit more about Joe Burrow. And another thing is, when you're not out there, he was asked, do you think people have forgotten about Joe Burrow? And he's like, look, when you're not out there and you're injured, people don't see you. And I'm going to give them something to talk about this year. And I think, that's true. Obviously, the topic is it's Patrick Mahomes. And of course, it's Patrick Mahomes. He's the best quarterback in the NFL, and he deserves to be number one when it comes to quarterback rankings, even though they're lame and annoying and boring, and I'm over them. Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, and of course, a guy like Joe Burrow are atop of the AFC. I didn't put anybody in any certain order, but I kind of liked what he had to say about it, even though, Joe tries to stay off social media. It seems like he's posting a little bit more. He's listening to what people are saying. He notices that people don't see him out there, but he still feels like he is a talented quarterback and one of the best in the NFL. And I think all of that's absolutely huge. He mentioned, hey, I'm 10 to 15 pounds more. I'm stronger, even though I feel like some of these things that he mentioned on the Pardon My Take podcast, he talked about in his press conference before, but you just don't have a mic to those questions. So a lot of people couldn't hear those questions in the OTAs and the offseason program. But did anything else really stand out for you in the interview on Pardon My Take?
Sorry, spider. I was killing a spider.
Ooh.
Nothing really stood out to me that much. It's always interesting. Burrow kind of likes the same podcast families. Like he kind of likes that, like, I don't know how to describe it, but it is kind of like Barstool adjacent, although I don't think he's actually gone on, like, maybe Pardon My Take is a Barstool podcast, but Barstool adjacent podcast. That's where, okay. Yeah. Barstool and Barstool adjacent podcast. He seems to like that. Maybe just like the humor and while still being sports related. I don't know, but that's where he always seems to go. That was my first takeaway. I was like, Burrow on another podcast, and it's Barstool related. So I think he just likes doing those out of all the possible podcasts he could do. Other than that, not really much to take away. I mean, 10 to 15 pounds heavier. I also had the quick brain thought of don't get too big, you know. And that was Tim Tebow and Brady Quinn. They couldn't really throw footballs because they love working out too much. They got too muscular. So make sure you don't bulk up too much. But I think he's all right where he is. He's always a little bit thicker than I think people think and stronger than people think. You could see it if you're a Bengals fan and everything. You see him get out of these crazy sacks with his strength. But I think the average person would probably compare him to a bunch of guys that are like kind of slimmer, kind of a little easier to bring down. I don't think they consider just how strong he is. And if he's 10 to 15 pounds stronger, that'll give him even more ability to break out of those sacks. So, yeah. I mean, like Pickett kept getting Burrow comparisons. I thought Pickett was just too easy to bring down in comparison, where maybe he escapes the pocket, does some crazy stuff in college. But when guys got their hands on him, was he able to like break free of that? I didn't really think so. And I think that's one thing that, well, there's a lot of issues with what Pickett did in Pittsburgh, but that was one of them. It was like one of the first things I noticed when they kept doing the comparison. I was like, I mean, he hasn't really escaped sacks from strength. He just kind of like runs away. And, you know, Burrow did that too. But I think being able to stay upright through contact is pretty huge. And it's also something that Derek Carr lacked, which I don't think that comparison's happened, but he's the first guy I think of when I'm thinking of like quarterback that should probably add a little good weight to be able to stay in the pocket and stay upright.
Just one more thing really quickly, because this will be our last podcast before they begin their training camp, and then we'll have one after the first week of practice. When you think about the outlook for training camp for Joe Burrow, I would be a huge fan if they kind of did it similar to his offseason OTAs. I don't need to see Joe Burrow out there when it's 110 degrees, going full force, showing, hey, everybody, I'm healthy. Look at me, my wrist, I've been cleared. I would love to just kind of see it balanced out when it comes to the schedule. You know, what do you want to see? Say Joe Burrow is 100%, he's been cleared. Should he be out there every day? This is a guy who hasn't had a full training camp. We've talked about plenty of times since he's been in the NFL. You know, what are you looking for from Joe when it comes to training camp in 2 weeks?
I am looking for an unscheduled rest day to watch Twitter meltdown. Where is he? He's done. He's injured again. And then it's just like, oh, yeah, we gave him a day of rest. He's just back the next day. That happened already. I don't know. He's already thrown the ball. Like, I feel like they've got probably a good idea of how this should go in terms of, you know, rest days. Burrow, I think, is going to take it a little bit more lax in terms of he doesn't need to try to push it like the calf sleeve last year when he had like a little bit of a calf injury, but he just played through it. I mean, that's just football player gladiator mentality. But when you're in the training camp, why are you've been the quarterback for 4 years. Like, you don't need to have the gladiator mentality to go out there for another training camp rep. Like, we could take those ones off, keep that for the games for sure. But, you know, training camp, you know, Jake Browning's, we've seen it. He's pretty competent. So he can go out there and give him a good practice.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think we've heard Joe talk about that. It's kind of like a maturity thing. You don't have to be Superman, and they need you in September through hopefully February. That's all you need from your NFL regular season and postseason quarterback. What you do in June and July, I know this sounds so silly, and I hear people say it all the time. You can't win games in training camp, but you can lose them if your quarterback isn't good to go when it comes to September. So, you know, I'm expecting that too, and I'm totally fine with it. Again, he's out there, he's getting his reps when he needs to. But if it's a hot day and maybe Joe's not feeling it, maybe the wrist feels a little bit sore, because again, we don't have a comparison who you know, an NFL quarterback who's had this injury that they can compare it to when it comes to, hey, how you feeling out there? So far, so good. I think the Bengals are being smart with it. I think Joe is being smart with it. He has to listen to his body versus what he did. He even mentioned, you know, if you look back at week 1 against the Cleveland Browns, he probably would have done that differently. And maybe he's not out there and he's not pushing it, especially in that weather. And I think that's absolutely huge when it comes to what he has battled during training camps, during regular seasons in his NFL career. So hopefully we see that. I just want everyone to keep calm. And I'm looking forward to some training camp battles. We've talked enough about those. Do you have any other things to say about Mr. Joe Burrow?
Nope.
Yeah, I feel like we hit it. Go check out that podcast, though. Pardon my take. It's about an hour long and pretty good. Nothing too crazy. Nothing that new that Joe hasn't mentioned before, but a pretty good interview with Joe Burrow. And next, we'll get to your mailbag questions over on Twitter. Thanks again for following along. Bengals_Sands. You can follow me at Lindsay Patterson. And it's always game day in Cincinnati. We are back on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. Not a whole lot going on for the Cincinnati Bengals around the NFL. Training camp is 2 weeks and a few days away at Paycor Stadium. We will get to your mailbag questions now. Thank you, as always, for sending those over. And it is almost that time to talk about preseason, so let's do it now. Can preseason help the Bengals with that slow start?
Hopefully. I mean, get them playing together. I think one thing that helped the slow start is it's going to be a new slot receiver, possibly. I mean, if it's, or a new third receiver, let's say, in their 11 personnel sets. So he needs to get acclimated. He should probably be out there for the preseason. Could be a new tight end as a starter in Gesicki. Or it could be Drew Sample that starts the game. But either way, Gesicki should probably get plenty of preseason reps. And just to get live game reps with some of the guys around them. And maybe you want the starters to get those too. I think it would make sense. Just, get a few drives in with your guys. The injury risk is pretty minimal, although it is there. And everybody gets made fun of when their player gets injured. Like, what is that front office doing? What is that coaching staff doing? Type of thing. But I do think it helps. I think it helps. I mean, you hear players talk about how they should probably play a little bit in the preseason more than just like 2 snaps of like honorary preseason ball and then leave. They should get out there, have some real reps, and then a couple drives and then head out. I know they're worried about injury risk, but they have been very slow to start every season. I don't think that's all on the players, though. I think some of that is also like the coaching staff seems to really adapt well when they see what's coming at them, but they have not yet, and maybe they will now. They have not really been prepared for what changes defenses are throwing at them before the season starts, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. When it comes to preseason, and I'm sure we'll have a whole topic on starters. Should they play? What does that look like? I do think it's important for some of the starters. I wouldn't mind seeing the linemen out there for a couple series, maybe a half of a quarter. We'll see what that looks like. Joe Burrow, I don't need to see him out there. I know a lot of people feel about 50% on putting Joe out there for the preseason. But for me personally, I'm fine if we don't see Joe Burrow until the first snap against the Patriots at Paycor Stadium at 1:00 in September. I am totally fine with that. And yes, you can look at Joe and say he's had slow starts, and not even counting last year versus the Browns. We can all look at what happened in that Pittsburgh Steelers game. That was a little wild, but they were extra point away from making a comeback in the second half. And, I'm not too down on Joe for that, especially if he's getting his reps in training camp, even if he is having rest days. But when it comes to the offensive line, the secondary, I want to see, hey, put the cornerbacks out there. Let's see what these starters look like. Those are battles that I'll be looking forward to when it comes to the secondary, safety room, cornerbacks. I don't know if we'll see them out there a lot. There is that second game that you'll see more of the starters. I feel like you see that a lot in the NFL. And the last game is pretty much who's making the roster, the few guys that you do have left when it comes to depth pieces. So I don't know. I'm really 50% on all the starters getting reps out there, but I don't need to see Joe in preseason. And I know everybody kind of feels about 50% on that topic.
He wants to be out there. I don't know. I might be fine with it. He wants to take a hit before the season starts. Look, Tom Brady did it at 40 years old. So, if he can do it, I don't know. I feel like Burrow could probably go out there and take one hit. But also that one hit could be season changing. It's up to the staff will probably know the best whether or not there's a real big chance of a re-injury. Like, are you playing with fire the entire season with the wrist, or like is the wrist fully fine, or will it be fine by week 4? But right now, maybe there is some type of re-injury risk. I don't know. And just with his body in general. But if he really pushed to be out there, like, yeah, you could send him out there for a drive. Now, will that drive have 7-step dropbacks with 5-man protection? Heck no. I would not be doing that. You'll be handing the ball off twice and throwing something in quick game. That's about it to me, which is what he did after the ACL. He came back, he handed the ball off twice, threw a screen pass that Jamar dropped, and then left. It was not exciting.
It's kind of crazy, not to get too far off topic, but the Jamar Chase preseason, never forget.
So bad. Objectively, one of the worst preseasons I've seen. He had 5 targets and he dropped 3 of them or something like that. He didn't catch a single pass.
People wanted him to go play in a whole nother league. Well, Mike Florio wanted him to go play in another league, and it's absolutely crazy that Jamar just went off and he was rookie of the year, and it was just like, okay, guys, whatever. But yeah, it's crazy to think about. 3 preseason games, plenty to talk about when we get there, and all of that will be here in about a month. We'll get to our next Twitter question. What's not being talked about enough going into camp? That's probably what the question was. I apologize.
Okay. Punter battle? I'm going to keep pushing it. I think it's a real battle. Come on.
It's here.
Yeah, well, you've got Brad Robbins, who on Twitter did say, I will be better, when somebody said be good or something. I don't remember. Somebody was like, punt better, and he said, I will. So I was like, oh, okay. So he's seeing the fan reaction. So maybe that's just lit a fire on him. He's going to be awesome. Or will it be Punalytics guy, McNamara, Austin McNamara from Texas Tech.
Good
McNamara
punter name.
Yeah, I think it's a good name. I think it's a good name for a punter for sure. They had him as the number 2 punter. I mean, they thought he'd get drafted, got him undrafted. So that kind of gives Robbins like the slightest leg up in terms of they'd have to cut him and lose money, I think. But 6th round picks get cut all the time. So I don't think it's like a real leg up. It's more of like if they're exactly even, we'll keep the guy we drafted because it's a tiny bit more expensive to cut him. Other than that, I think it's going to be real competition. I think some of it is going to be how does McNamara hold, because we know Robbins is a good holder. So can he pick that up and hold through elements and through, bad snaps all around? Or is he going to have a holding flub? Because that's going to be more important, I think, to the Bengals too, of just like, well, we need you to hold well, like we will hopefully have more field goal attempts than punt attempts, or at least extra points plus field goals more than punts. I mean, that's what everybody shoots for, right? So do that job well.
For me personally, I don't know if it's not the whole what's not being talked about enough, but it's kind of crazy to think, and I know they're going to be without Tyler Boyd. When you look at the wide receiver reps and even in the tight end reps, if you get your rookies who were obviously battling injuries, to be determined if they're going to be cleared for, training camp when it starts. But I think there's just a lot of weapons for Joe Burrow and this offense to work with during training camp. I mean, you can go to the run game, you could look at the tight end room, you can look at the wide receivers right now, and I wouldn't even say a lot of different battles, but just a lot of different reps and weapons and what you can do with guys like Dan Pitcher in his first year as the offensive coordinator. Zach Taylor, he had mentioned in the offseason, I'm going to give Dan Pitcher, a little more of this during more of the offseason workouts. We'll see if that continues during training camp and giving him that opportunity to let Zach sit in on some of the defensive meetings. What does that look like? How long does that last? I'm not too down on Zach Taylor as an offensive play caller, but I do want to see what Dan Pitcher can bring, because around the NFL, a lot of people wanted Dan Pitcher. He interviewed last year with the Bucs. He didn't get on the plane to do another interview for the offensive coordinator position. Around the NFL, had a couple other interviews in the Cincinnati Bengals. I feel like it worked out perfectly with Brian Callahan getting that job early and being able to promote Dan Pitcher. I don't know how long he'll be here, but offensively, adding a pass game coordinator, what will that look like for Joe Burrow during training camp, getting, into regular season, just some of the different assistant coaches and Dan Pitcher going into year 1 as the offensive coordinator. Maybe we've talked enough about T. Higgins and the franchise tag and extension. Will it happen? Won't it? Jamar Chase, when does that extension happen? I think more for me, it's on the coaches side that I don't feel like we're talking about enough as we're getting closer to training camp. We talked about it plenty the start of the offseason, but more in the training camp. What does that look like? And how long does Dan Pitcher kind of get to take over the offensive coordinator play calling? And does that continue during training camp and preseason for me?
Okay, yeah. Coaches makes sense. When you first said wide receivers, I feel like that's being talked about the most. Like what do you mean? I shouldn't
have added that in there, and I should have kind of combined it more with, because of course I'm exhausted talking about wide receivers right now. Even thinking about it, I don't even want to get into the Jamar Chase extension. I'm putting it off till next year. I know it's going to happen. It'll happen next year. I don't even want to talk about it now, because it's an easy decision. But no, I should have just kind of more on the weapon side and what that's going to look like overall with a guy like Dan Pitcher as the offensive coordinator. And I hope he gets that opportunity. I do not know how. I hope Dan Pitcher is getting a head coaching job next year, because he just killed it as an OC for the Bengals offense in his first year.
Yep, that'd be great. That'd be awesome. All right. Wow.
That's all I got. You know what? I feel like I didn't even answer that question because I feel like everything has been talked about with the Cincinnati Bengals. I want to be honest. Besides the punter battle, I mean, like, really, was there anything that hasn't been talked about right now?
What are they doing in base defense? Is McKinley Jackson starting? That got talked about a bit during draft season. All right, moving forward, how does Zack Moss stack up in pass protection? I mean, like, when I watched, I thought he was fine. I didn't think it was incredible. I didn't think it would be like, oh my goodness, it's like he's as good as Drew Sample is. But I also didn't think he was like a liability. I thought he was solid. I think, and that's kind of what you're searching for. Have a guy that you can trust out there in pass protection and catch the ball and to run the ball all at once, so you don't know what's good. 3 pitches. What could be coming your way on 3rd and short? No idea. 3rd and long, they'll know what's coming anyway. But is he staying in or is he going out? Or is it Drew Sample in there because they still like him as the pass protection back? So I think he was solid. I don't think it is the best you'll ever see, but I think it's much better than what Mixon brought, just in terms of his eyes and knowing where he needs to go.
And that's absolutely huge. I don't know how to feel about the running back room. I want to say I feel better, and not to kind of steer it over to, they're going to miss Joe Mixon. I don't think that way at all. And that's nothing against Joe Mixon. I'm excited about Zack Moss. I'm excited about Chase Brown and what that looks like. Who's getting more of the percentage on the field. I still feel like it's 50-50, and maybe it leans a little more towards Zack Moss. Maybe they do bring in Samaje Perine. It feels like it's just destined to happen when he gets cut, that he comes back to Cincinnati and they have the 3 running backs. And I know Trevion's on the roster right now, but I just don't think he's their 3rd RB. So we'll see what that looks like when the training camp battles start. If they do decide to add another running back, which I still feel like there's a vet out there, and we've talked about that on the podcast over the last few episodes. But yeah, I'd be okay with that. Get explosive, get fast, catch the ball, trust your running back on the 1 yard line or at least to get 1 yard. That's what's huge for me, because yes, this is a passing first offense when you think about all the weapons they have, but eventually they got to have a run game. They just do. You won't survive in the NFL without one.
Yeah, they need to be able to run the ball, and you hope that the running backs and what it seems like an improved run blocking offensive line is going to be able to bring them. So we'll see. I still think they have the general issue of they can't really get heavy. They didn't really go out and get guys that could make them heavy, like a good heavy personnel team. They didn't go and get any type of big blocking tight end. They didn't really go get, a fullback. So they're still kind of constrained to the 11 personnel, even though I think that Drew Sample's a good blocking tight end. You kind of wish there was just like a second guy that you could throw in there. Maybe he only gets 10 snaps a game usually, or 5 snaps a game. But you don't want to go full jumbo all the time with an extra offensive lineman because, defenses know they don't really need to cover that. You want a guy that can, be a Drew Sample level receiving, but they need a second Drew Sample. That's what I mean. They need a second Drew Sample that gets like 5 snaps a game. And when they want to pound the ball, they can bring him in and have 2 good blocking tight ends that can also, they can at least catch. And, they're a credible threat. Look what he did to Taylor Rapp.
You know what? Besides, I don't even want to break down the roster right now, but for how much people dislike Drew Sample, it is crazy to think about. We're going into 2024. The guy signed a 3-year extension, and he's reliable. He's a reliable part of this offense, and it was a good offseason move by them. It's Drew Sample season.
I agree. I'm fully on board. Drew Sample season.
Let's see it. We'll get to more of your Twitter questions next. Again, make sure you're always following along Bengals_Sand. You can follow me at Alan Diaz Patterson on It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati. Just a couple more of your mailbag questions over on Twitter. Next, we have most important player on the offense, not named Joe or Jamar.
T. Higgins.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, I read this question when I was sending it to Spencer, and I said to myself, the easy answer is T. Higgins, obviously.
Okay. Do you want to get to the 3rd guy?
I wish we could even cut out Joe, Jamar, or T.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Is like, or
Yeah,
the
yeah,
fourth
yeah.
guy. You want to go the
Let's do
fourth
it.
guy?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, give your fourth guy.
So my fourth guy, I wanted to make it an offensive lineman. I really
Mm-hmm.
did because I thought, you know what? Joe has seen enough. Joe has dealt with enough. Let that important player be an offensive lineman and who I want that to be. And yes, I want the interior to be stronger and better. And maybe we'll see that because Cordell Bolson did start to play better last year towards the end. Teddy Karras, I want to see that out of you. Alex Kappa, same. I was a little disappointed in you last year. I want to see more out of Orlando Brown Jr.
That's also my answer. Funny enough, yeah. And the reason is because I think the tackle is probably going to be it's probably more important, I guess, than the interior because they don't get as much help, at least from the center, or they can't be hidden as well. But if Trent Brown isn't who we are expecting, they have a guy that I feel pretty good about flipping right in there. We talk about Amarius Mims, who hasn't played left tackle at all, flipping into that spot if Orlando Brown gets hurt or he's playing really poorly. Yeah, that's not ideal. That he's flipping sides and he doesn't have that much experience already. So while I feel good about it on the right side, I think left side, left tackle, probably your fourth most important. So it'd be Joe Jamar T, then Orlando Brown.
And you're paying him a lot of money. You wanna see more. And what does that look like going into year 2 with the Cincinnati Bengals? Having Trent Brown on the other side, we've talked about it plenty. If someone can guarantee us about, I'd say, what was our number for Trent Brown games? We'd feel good about 12, 13.
Yeah. If I could get over 10.5, I would love that.
Yeah, it's sign up right now. Especially when you have a guy like Amaris on the sideline. And yes, he hasn't had any NFL reps yet, but he's obviously a very huge human and talented. And he went in the first round for a reason. And there were rumors that the Chiefs wanted to jump up and get him, and they weren't able to get him, obviously, because he went to the Cincinnati Bengals. So I want to see a little more out of Orlando Brown Jr. And it's wild saying that because, again, the offensive lineman that we've seen protect Joe Burrow, he's an upgrade over. I know how a lot of people felt about Jonah Williams last year and kind of his time in Cincinnati, but I still felt like he was, I almost feel like I have to whisper when I say this, but quality offensive lineman for a while. Okay. A little bit below average.
Yeah.
And that was enough for Joe Burrow. Yeah, he was one of the players that gave up the Clowney play, but it happens. So
that's where I am on that too. I mean, anybody could have given up the hit that was a Clowney. Look at what Rankins did to Alex Kappa. And then let's say that hit was what hurt him. Like, do you now think Alex Kappa needs, thrown out of the organization? Probably not. That's a solid starter. Same with Ted Karras gave up quarterback hits. Cordell Bolson gave up his share. Look, go back to that Rams game. Let's just say one of those hits that Aaron Donald put on him, it did more than re-aggravate, because he was trying to play injured, and it just ended the season week 3. Then I don't know. It could be anybody. It could be Orlando Brown, who didn't have his best year. Anybody could have been out there and gave up the quarterback hit that injured Joe Burrow. What was interesting about it, I mean, it came after the throw too. It's not like he got hit while he was throwing or before he threw it or just barely got the ball off. He threw it and then the hit came and then he just landed on it. It wasn't even like the hit was what devastated. It was just all fluky, whatever, with Burrow's injury. I think people have like the emotional response of like, there's no way you can bring him back after that. It's like, okay, I guess.
No.
But I also feel like, like if he's going to give you solid level play and it was a guy that had a contract, he would still be here. I think Jonah is a solid level offensive tackle. I thought he played okay last year for the most part, but yeah, moving on. I think Trent Brown is a better player though.
Yeah, I'm excited. I hope that we get the most out of Trent Brown. And, if he's able to play more than 10.5 games, that's a win for the Cincinnati Bengals. And that gives Mims a little bit of time to get ready for his first NFL start. And hopefully he doesn't have to be out there yet because Trent Brown and Orlando Brown Jr. are getting it done at tackle. Move on to our next and final question in the mailbag. Oh, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I've never watched the movie where WALL-E's in it, but what's the best Pixar movie and why is it WALL-E?
Okay, I don't think it's WALL-E. WALL-E's a good movie though. I mean, sometimes I get these confused, but I'm pretty sure Pixar. My favorite is probably Monsters Inc. or The Incredibles. Toy Story also was very good.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go Toy Story, and I apologize because I haven't watched like half of these movies. I know Inside Out is one of them. Is
It was
that right?
good. Yeah, the sequel was all right. Yeah, my fiance, my wife, loves
Yeah,
these movies, so I've seen pretty much all of them except like The Good Dinosaur. I think it's a Pixar movie. I'm
yeah.
not watching that. But I've seen like all of these. What I think is the most underrated Pixar movie, Ratatouille. I love Ratatouille.
Ratatouille, that's good. That's a really good one. But yeah, I mean, I'm just going with the OG. I'm going Toy Story.
Toy Story's
I'll
great.
watch every single one of them. They could put out Toy Story 20, and I'd be like, oh yeah, I gotta watch it.
Yeah, I didn't even really like Toy Story 4 felt whatever to me. I don't really want Toy Story 5, but it's coming out, so I'll deal with it. More
That's great.
importantly, around the same time, it's coming out soon. It's come 2 years. Shrek 5 just got announced.
Okay, I'm gonna admit this. I've never watched Shrek.
Oh, it was a perfect time. Just watch the first two. Very important.
I mean, I've watched the clips. I know who people are. I know the characters, but I've just never watched. You know what? I'm gonna be on a plane this weekend, and maybe I'll watch Shrek. It's gonna be on one of the plane movies, and then
Oh yeah.
I'll give my my Twitter summary of the movie and what I thought about it. But yeah, and speaking of this, our friend Matt, he actually sent this question over on Twitter, and he's thinking about getting a tattoo. I'm not sure if you saw his question, but he's thinking about getting the tattoo of the Bengal stripe on the shoulder. What do you think about that?
I wouldn't do it. But, your body, your choice.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it could look cool. Me personally, I don't think I would, but I don't think it necessarily means it would be terrible. It's probably better than like getting, at least in my opinion, I think it's better than like getting like the Bengal tiger head or God forbid the bee on your arm or something. It's better than that. So it's a pretty fun way to show support. I mean, I think it's out of all the Bengal related options, that'd be up there for one of the better ones.
I think he should do it on one of the on right or left shoulder. And if the Bengals win the Super Bowl this year, he should get the other shoulder done.
Oh yeah, 2025 written underneath or something.
Yep. And maybe a Lombardi or something. I don't know. But definitely get one shoulder done. And if the Bengals win it all, you have to get the other shoulder done. And this needs to be a virtual deal, Matt. If you are listening to this podcast, if you are listening, you stay till the very end. At minute 38, when there's not a whole lot going on right now, a little Joe Burrow podcast, little mailbag as always. We appreciate you sending your questions. You can follow Mike over on Twitter, Bengals_Sands. You can follow me at LNDS Patterson. The next time we are back, there will be real life training camp for the Cincinnati Bengals, and we'll have everything to break down from all of the battles, including the most important one, the punter battle. Thank you as always for listening to It's Always Game Day in Cincinnati.